Two?
No, it's on the thing.
Okay, it's on there. So there is a little QR code right there. You take a look at that. That QR code will actually send you directly to tigersvote.org. So you scan that with your phone and you can get in there really quickly. So we'll go ahead and start moving through the presentation now. So to just kind of give you an idea of why school districts run levies, we run those because it kind of bridges the gap or fills the gap between what the state funds and what our needs are to operate our district on a year-to-year basis. And so that's really what it is we take a look at what our actual costs are in comparison to what our traditional revenue sources are, and then there is a local levy that is taxed to allow us to generate some additional funds so that our operations continue at full capacity. So that's why you run a levy. These numbers here, and again, those are in front of you, are the numbers we're asking for. One of the things to be really clear about. This is something that was a question that presented itself on social media over the last couple of weeks. The question was this: as assessed valuation of your district increases, then the amount the school district gets increases. That is inaccurate. These amounts are the amounts that the district will collect. What happens if your assessed valuation increases is the amount of money people pay per thousand decreases. So as assessed valuation increases, the rate decreases. The school district does not receive any additional money when assessed valuation increases. Now, there is a really good way for assessed valuation to increase: new construction. We definitely want new construction. We want some industry. We want some different things to come into our community, because what that means is, let's say 10 property owners are paying for a levy. Well, now you add an 11. You're not increasing the amount, just 11 people are paying for that levy instead of 10. Now, let's say you have an additional home built or additional piece of industry built. Now it's even more people paying for the levy, but the levy amount does not increase. And so just want to be really clear. Again, that was a question that came up. What we're asking for local collection is about $11.5 million over 4 years. Really an important piece of information here. If voters in Ephrata approve the $11.5 million, it provides us the opportunity to access 13.1. That's an estimate, and I'll explain a little bit more on why that's an estimate in a second. But it allows us to collect money from the state, which is called local effort assistance. We are considered a property poor district. And so what does that mean? Here's an example. Not even an example, it's pretty concrete. Quincy's evaluation, if they looked at the entire school district over in Quincy, if I remember right, is right around $9 billion of full assessed valuation of every piece of property in Quincy. Ours is less than $2 million. So we're a school district that has basically the same enrollment, but their tax base close to $9 billion versus $2 billion. Therefore, we're considered property poor. They are not. So LEA, the state assistance, is not accessible to Quincy, but it is to us. An important thing to know too, this money that we have the potential to bring back to our community is money that's going to the state regardless if it comes back to us. So a lot of the various taxes that we pay to the state that end up supporting public education, and I can't in this moment tell you all of those different places because it's just above my pay grade of knowledge, but I can tell you we all pay taxes in various ways to the state. This is one of those opportunities to bring it back to Ephrata. The only way we can have a total of over 25 million is if voters approve this amount. Okay, so state amount is not available to us unless there's a local levy that is approved by voters. Okay. This just shows, this is just a graph to give you just a visual representation. The orange is basically the last 4 years, so the current levy that will be expiring, and then the next 4 years of levy. Like I said, we are looking for an increase that I'll talk about in a moment. The green is the state amount. You can see consistently what we get from the state exceeds what we're asking our local voters, property, to pay for in a levy. Some people may ask, Ken, we see a consistent increase over the last 4 years, but I see it flatlining. That aligns with what we traditionally do in Ephrata. It's because we do our best to conservatively estimate our revenues. You're in a much better situation if you conservatively estimate your revenues, and then you end up having more revenue than you estimate, than vice versa. Because if you aggressively estimate your revenues and your revenues end up coming in lower, your ability to pay your bills on a day-to-day basis become very, very difficult. Some other districts in our region have experienced that, where they've had some projections that were a little higher than what they actually ended up getting, and then that ended up putting their district in a real bind financially. One of the big drivers for that green, those green bars, so that LEA number, is enrollment. We've over the last, actually it's been longer than 4 years, but 4 years, we've seen a consistent increase in enrollment. But we do look and we do try to project based on our current enrollment. We try to do the best to project our kindergarten enrollment, which is incredibly hard, let me tell you. We do think there's a potential that our enrollment's going to flatline a bit. Therefore, that's why you see that green flatline. Okay? This here is just a graph that really just kind of shows some historical information in regards to our levies in Ephrata. In 2016, levy alone was over $5. Okay? That was pre what they call the McCleary decision, when the state of Washington and the Supreme Court in the state of Washington actually found our state in violation of the state constitution, because the state constitution actually indicates that it's the state's paramount duty to amply fund public education, and the state came in and said, we don't believe you're doing that. You're asking local people to do it too much. State, you need to support public education. And so you'll see over $5.08 is what we used to pay locally, and that's per 1,000. Dropped down to $1.50. That was when that McCleary decision happened. Very quickly after that, that number, sorry, I'll look at the actual rate instead of what we went to voters for. Went to $1.50, and then very quickly after that, the state said, oh wait, we understand it's our paramount duty to amply fund public education, but $1.50 is not enough locally. And so they created some parameters at that time. When they created the parameters, they created a parameter that basically said, we want you to still levy locally. And we want you to levy between $1.50 and $2.50. And if your rate can be between $1.50 and $2.50, you'll be able to fully access LEA. So essentially, the state kind of changed the game on us a little bit. I don't know if you've ever noticed that occasionally happens. But we tried to be responsive to that. And so you'll see our levy amounts changed over time. On our last levy, we projected $1.85 and it was $1.70. We projected $1.94 and it ended up being $1.62. See, they still lived within that $1.50 to $2.50, which again allowed us to fully access LEA. Let's go ahead and move on to the next page. I'm going to come back and talk about rate a little bit more in a bit. What does this pay for? You know, I know people want to know that. At the end of the day, what do we use our levy dollars on? And so a couple of things. Between local levy collection and the LEA amount that we can collect, it ends up being about 10% of our operating budget. This year, our operating budget, we project, is going to be roughly $50 million. So 10% of that is about $5 million that will be local levy taxation and then LEA. So it's a big portion of what we do. Supports a lot of the various programs for 2,800 kids. We have 2,800 students when you're looking at pre-K through our seniors. We've got a lot of students that walk our halls and work and engage in learning in our buildings. And so that 10% is funding, it's funding and supporting a lot of the work that we do with a lot of kids. A lot of people know this. Activities and athletics, funded through levy dollars. To just give you an idea of what that means in Ephrata, we had 1,100 participants in athletics last year. That was just at the middle school and high school. We had 600 participants in activities, kindergarten, through our high school. A lot of kids served and supported by levy dollars. We have elective classes at multiple buildings, high school, middle school, Parkway, music programs, for example, funded through levy dollars. Okay, that's just one example. A lot of the safety and security work that we do, funded through levy dollars. Instructional technology, the Promethean that's in front of you, funded through levy dollars. College in the high school. Some people say, well, what's college in the high school? College in the high school is, we have students that never have to leave the Ephrata High School campus and can fully earn collegiate credit. We do receive some funding from the state to support that program, but it's not fully levy dollars fully funded. And so it allows us to be whole to offer what's appropriate for kids. Some of our staff training, we have a specific amount of time, specific amount of days that we receive funding for staff on. We actually train staff beyond that, funded through levy dollars. Unfunded materials, supplies, and operating costs. Honestly, that's a huge, huge chunk of our operating budget. Matter of fact, unfunded in Ephrata, and I actually will show these statistics in a second, is over 6% of our budget is unfunded materials, supplies, and operating costs. Well, that's not bad. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. This is just a fun fact. So last year, our students levy-funded trips, 285 trips. We took our students around the earth 1.5 times because of levy dollars. So that's just a fun fact, kind of interesting little tidbit for you to take with you. At the end of the day, what do we project that it's going to cost our homeowners? Before I get there, this was another question that came up on social media. What about senior citizens, maybe disabled adults? Do they have the ability to, they may struggle to pay this levy tax? I don't control who can be taxed and who can't be. The county does. But I do want people to know that low-income senior citizens and disabled adults have the right and the ability to contact our assessor's office, because there are some exception. I'm trying to say that word as my mouth is getting really dry. Is there any water in this space? There is. I will read it so I can say it appropriately. Granite County's assessor's office is who they would contact. So just want to be really clear with the people in attendance right now. So here's where we're at. Our initial projections would indicate that the rate in 2025 is going to be $1.58. That's the last year of the levy that was ran 4 years ago. Okay, so that's what our initial projections are. Actually, hot off the press, literally within the last hour, I got a call from our county treasurer who indicated that, Ken, that's actually going to be lowered this year. Our assessed valuation in our county is actually higher than what we originally projected. Therefore, that rate that we believed was going to be $1.58 is going to be lower than that. Now, where that lands is still to be determined. But we believe, based on literally hot off the presses call from our treasurer, that's going to be much lower. Well, what does that mean? That means $1.85 is going to be lower. And the year after that will be lower. And the year after that will be lower. Because we based all of that on some conservative projections. We projected this year that from 2024 to 2025, that our assessed valuation in our county would increase across the county. Now, I understand there's individual homeowners that experience much more than this, but we projected across the county a 2% increase. You may ask, Ken, why would you project a 2% increase? Well, let me tell you, because counties around our region were getting 0% increases of total assessed valuation and even negative numbers in total assessed valuations. County's initial numbers to us said you're going to flatline. And we said that's just not accurate to our county. We're going to see some growth. We've seen some growth. And so we built in 2%. It looks like it's going to be even more than 2%. Okay? Thank you, Sharon. When I was a middle school principal, I could stand in front of kids for hours and never had the dry mouth, so I don't know what's happened to me. So again, I just want to tell you that this is based on a $1.58 increase to $1.85. Average home, again, based on those numbers, average home in Ephrata right now, $375,000, which is pretty incredible. It's good when you look at value in property long term, but I know it is costly when you're paying a rate per thousand. I completely get it. I own a home in Ephrata too. I understand. But this is what I want you to know. Based on these projections, what are we really asking for? We're asking for just under $11 more per month if your home is at $375. Obviously, if your home's less than that, it would be less. If your home is more than that, it would be more than that. But that's really what we're asking for. And a thing to remember is, I kind of talked about this a second ago. What we projected when the levy was passed 4 years ago was that the rate would be $2.03 in 2025. And it's going to be much, much lower than that. I'll talk more about that here in a second. So over the last 4 years, I just want to show you what was projected using traditional assessed valuation increases in Ephrata. So we initially thought we were going to be at $1.85 4 years ago. So back in 2022. Then it was going to be $1.94, $1.99, and $2.03. What we're actually asking for over this 4-year levy is to bring us back to the lowest rate the voters approved on the last levy. So we're actually trying to come down from that. Totally understand that this actually ended up down here, and that's a lift. But just in terms of the rates that we're proposing, we're going back to what voters, the lowest amount the voters approved before, just 2 visuals to show the same information. This here shows you what we were asking for. And again, those were our projections. $1.85, $1.94, $1.99, and then $2.03. What did voters end up paying? $1.70, $1.62, $1.54. And then again, based on what our 2% increase, we thought it was going to be $1.58. We actually believe it's going to be lower than that. That is very traditional for Ephrata. Because of the way we conservatively estimate, if you look at a long history of proposed levy amounts and actual levy amounts collected, not the dollar amounts, but the rates, very traditionally do our rates, it's very common for our rates to come in lower than we project. And so that's not an unusual thing to see in Ephrata because of the way we budget and the way we project. And what we don't want to do to our community is this. We don't want to project $1.85 and then you pay $1.95. We don't want to do that. We don't want to project $1.94 and you pay $2.04. We would much rather project $1.85 and you pay $1.75. And so we really try to do that real intention. Couple of things to just know. We got really close last year to potentially not being able to fully collect LEA. Now, we still can access a portion of LEA, but we would have had to leave some of that money in Olympia. Like I said, based on the call I just got, there's a potential we might have to leave some of the money in Olympia this year, okay? But there's just no way to fully know that moving forward. Therefore, that's a bit of the reason that $1.85 makes sense. Not only is it financially what we need, it's about a $500,000 increase, and I'll talk about why we're increasing that in a moment. But it also gives us a little bit of capacity so that we're not leaving money in Olympia. Because we definitely want that money to come to our community if we can. So, thank you. Go ahead. This is a piece of information just to kind of let you know, where does Ephrata sit in comparison to the rest of the county and in comparison to the state. So what this data really is, and I apologize, the most recent data I have is from 22-23. So it's over a year old, but it's the most recent data I can access. So this is what this data is showing. Sorry, okay. Actually, can you go back? I want to keep it there for a second. What this data is showing you when you look at these percentage of your total revenue, it's the amount of your budget that is based on local property tax. The statewide average is 12% of school districts' operating budget is funded by local property tax. In Ephrata, it's 4.37%. We are the lowest, now you can jump to that. We are the lowest district in our entire county in terms of the amount of money in our overall operating budget that actually comes from local property tax. We're not only the lowest in our county, we're about a third of the average statewide. So I think that's just important for people to know where we sit in comparison to the rest of the county and where we sit in comparison to the state. Thank you. I'm putting this on here because I think it's important for you to know that, our mayor, I love Bruce. As some of the conversations happened on social media, Bruce put some information and shared, here's my tax amount that goes to the district. Really appreciated that. One of the things Bruce didn't share is that in 2024, there's actually 4 things that are being paid to the district. I just want to be really upfront about it. One is the levy. One is a transportation levy that we will not be paying this year, 2025. That's done. One is a capital levy. And then a bond. Columbia Ridge Elementary, brand new. Ephrata Middle School, brand new, paid for by our bond dollars, the bond approval. We weren't able to get fully to grant. The reason we weren't able to fully get to grant is because our projections, which built in normal inflationary increases along with contingencies. Our budgeted grant, when we ended up wanting to go in and dive in and do the work, it was going to cost us 63% more than what we had. We didn't have enough money to do it. And so what did we do? We gave money back to our voters. Now I want to explain that giving money back to our voters, as much as I wish we could say, here's your money back, that's not how bonds work. Bonds have already been paid for. It's an investment. And so what we were able to do is we were able to take the unused money and essentially invest it. And because of that investment, you're going to see a dramatic decrease in future bond payments. But you can't do that until later in the life of the bond. And so you'll see that in a future graph, that you're going to see a dramatic decrease in the bond amount that everyone's going to have to pay in future years, because it was a 20-year bond. And so you're going to see savings long term. And what it actually is going to end up saving our local voters is about $8.1 million. That's the amount of money we would have been paying towards this bond that our local voters will not have to pay. And so you'll see that in another graph. I do want to talk about this transportation levy. So the transportation levy funded 4 buses. We were a bit off in regards to keeping our fleet complete, following the state's depreciation model. The state actually has a really, really good model for you to stay up on your buses. But at some point in that process, we were a little off. We had an increase in enrollment. We had a number of different things. Some of your buses don't necessarily last as long as you're wanting them to or projecting they will. So we needed to purchase 4 more buses. We fully believe that that purchase now is going to get us into a place where following the state's depreciation cycle is going to allow us to stay complete in our fleet moving forward. Local voters approved that, gave us the ability to purchase those 4 buses. Didn't fully purchase the buses, but gave us the funding to pay for the vast majority of those buses. And then we generated some of that with other revenue sources. So that's there. Capital levy. What are we paying for in the capital levy? There's a storage building that's going across from our varsity soccer field. Am I even pointing in the right direction? I'm getting my bearings here. Probably that direction. We ran out of storage, and we were paying for storage on a month-to-month basis. And we were paying for storage up at the port. We were paying for shipping containers, all kinds of different things, because we need to be able to store a lot of things, especially when you're in the midst of construction and the work that we've been doing. So we needed to build a storage facility. We built that storage facility. Another thing that we're taking on, our maintenance and transportation facility. Let me just give you an idea of the needs there. Our mechanics in that transportation facility, in the winter, we're expected to work in below freezing temperatures, and in the summer, work in temperatures 100, 105 degrees in their shop, while they're maintaining our buses, maintaining our fleet, keeping us up and running so that we can get kids to and from school every single day. We're going to upgrade that facility, take care of some insulation, take care of some heating and air. Again, that was supported by that capital levy. 2 other pieces of that. Also some additional technology funding. Yes, the levy funds some technology, but we recognized and understood that there were some gaps there. And so local levy support is supporting some additional technology work. And then the last piece, and this is one that I think is really important for people to know. We were able to fund the replacement of our high school football field lights. Brian, how many years ago? 4 years ago, 3 years ago? We went to take the very first pull down. And when we went to take the very first pole down, which was a wooden pole that was in place before Brian and I were born. Brian and I both grew up here. A number of people in this room did. Very first pole we went to take down was rotted all the way through. In other words, it was a windstorm away from potentially falling on a kid, a community member. We needed to replace those poles, and luckily we got them replaced before something drastic happened. Here's the bad news, and good news at the same time. Bad news is our other lights are wooden poles. Baseball field, softball field, soccer field. Good news, they're not as old as the football field lights. Other good news, this levy's going to fund going to steel poles, okay, and replacing our lighting. And so that was approved by voters, okay, and then that bond. Go ahead, Sarah. So this is just a visual to kind of get a picture of it all. And so it's just kind of color coded. You can, again, go to tigersvote.org, look at it a little closer, see it a little more, hands-on maybe. Levy alone, 1718, the Cleary decision said, we're going to pay for it all because the state said we had to. Remember, the state Supreme Court told the state, you're not doing your job. You're not fully funding or amply funding public education. Start doing your job. The state said, yeah, we agree. Dropped it down. And then they very quickly after that changed their mind and said, no, do some things locally. We at that time ran our bond. So you see the bond come in. So bond and levy combined ended up being less than what we were paying for levy alone before. This is the existing bond. I just want you to just take a look at what the rate was back in 2020 versus what the rate will be in 2029. This is the value of defeasance. Remember that giving money back to the voters. Again, not exactly giving back. It's actually saving voters in the future is how defeasance works. And that's just the legality of how you have to work around the bond. So you see that dark gray bond goes from a pretty large piece of taxation to a pretty small piece of taxation on a 20-year bond. Really, really good news as you look at it. This is that transportation levy, that little light color there. Like I said, ends in 2024. This is that other capital levy that I just described that has the lights, the maintenance facility, storage, etc. And then this down here is what we're asking in terms of our EP&O levy. So that's what you see on here. Why did I include this? Because I want to be very transparent with everyone in the with our entire community. We were not able to get to Grand Elementary. We were not able to get to Parkway. We were not able to address this pack. We were not able to address the high school. We do plan to run a bond in 2020. What year are we? 2026 for 2025. I almost said 2029. And then down the road a little further than we're wanting to be. We do plan to run a bond next year. And we believe there's a potential we're going to have the capacity to do so, especially if we see new construction and we see industrial increases, et cetera. All of those things help long term. And if you notice, even if we add a bond on top of what our current taxation is, it actually puts us in a place where we're lower in terms of rate than what we were with levy alone on average historically. So just those are just the facts. I told you I was going to talk about the increase, and so I really want to spend some time on this. So yes, it is an increase. It's a replacement levy. A replacement does not mean same. It means one expires and another one replaces it. And we are asking local voters to approve a larger collection than what they're currently than what we're collecting currently. Why are we asking for it? So this is just one piece of data. 6 years ago, the expense of running extracurricular activities and athletics was about $1 million. Last year, that increased to $1.4 million. So that alone is a $400,000 increase from what we were seeing 6 years ago. And you can just see that over time, it's dramatically increasing. You may say, well, what did you do and made really good decisions and were able to operate really, really low expenditures? That was a weird year. 2021, there was people saying, you can't go to school. You can't go to Walmart. So activities and athletics existed very differently in 2020 and 2021. So I would say you would have seen some pretty consistent increases had COVID not happened. But just looking at the million to the 1.4 million, I think is important. Let's go ahead and keep moving. So this is material supplies and operating costs. I told you I'd come back to this. So material supplies and operating costs specifically fall in 9 categories. And please don't ask me to tell you what those 9 categories are. I'd have somebody bring it up and help me because I can't remember what they are off the top of my head. But you can only spend the money in these categories. It is very, very accountability based. You can't say, well, that was a material if it wasn't truly a material. You can't say, well, that was a supply if it wasn't truly a supply. You can't say, well, that was an operating cost unless it truly was and it falls within those categories. So I just wanted to be very, very clear. We received some funding from the state to support material supplies and operating costs, which we affectionately call MSUCs. Not really affectionately, but middle school kids normally laugh at my dad jokes, right? That's okay. You don't know me as well. Macy knows. Emsley knows. And differently. I was Emsley's soccer coach. Did we lose a game when I coached you? We were undefeated, that's right. Make sure you celebrate that. Tell that to your neighbors. Okay. I was actually undefeated as a soccer coach. It's on my fridge. Jeremy helping. Jeremy helped in the back. Jeremy Scott was on the team as well. I should probably give that context. So unfunded MSOCs versus funded MSOCs. Again, we received funding from the state. So 6 years ago, we received about $3 million from the state to pay for MSOCs. It actually cost us almost $4 million. So we were actually underfunded about $800,000. I want to just fast forward to last year. So 6 years ago, we were unfunded from the state on material supplies and operating costs, MSOCs, $800,000. Last year, $2.8 million. That's the primary reason we need to ask for a larger than normal increase in the first year of our levy. Is because we're just not receiving appropriate funding from the state. And I want to tell you this. You may say, well, Ken, what are you doing about that? Well, I'm going to tell you, Aaron Cummings, my assistant superintendent, one of our board directors, Mike Flurkins, who's our legislative kind of lead at the board level. We were at CTAC this weekend, beginning the process, not even beginning the process, but continuing the process to advocate on behalf of you. And let legislators know that we are not being funded fully, and because we're not being funded fully, we have to ask our local taxpayers to do more. Prior to that, I was in Olympia doing the same thing. A month prior, I'm meeting with Tom Dennett. We are doing everything we can to advocate on behalf of the Ephrata School District. We are doing what we can. We encourage you to do the same. So we're tackling it. But it's ballooned to 43.6% of our MSOC's expenses are unfunded. It's pretty incredible. Let's keep going. I think this is an important statistic, and I shared this earlier. 6 years ago, overall expenditures, unfunded MSOCs, not total MSOCs, unfunded MSOCs 6 years ago was 2.5% of our expenditures. Last year, over 6% of our expenditures. So when you think about a budget that's pretty large, we're talking multi-millions, 6% is a big deal. So let's go ahead and keep moving. Two pieces of MSOCs that are really, really difficult for school districts right now. One is insurance, and the other is utilities. I think we've all, as homeowners and people who pay for electricity and our utilities, we've all felt this at home. We're feeling it too. Insuring the Ephrata School District 6 years ago was about $240,000. Insuring the Ephrata School District last year was about $530,000. About a $300,000 increase over 6 years. It's a dramatic increase. Hard to sustain. We do receive funding through MSOCs, and part of that goes towards insurance, but not that much. Utilities, making sure the lights are turning on, the water's running, toilets are flushing, heat is on, all of those things. 6 years ago, about $415,000 in our district. Last year, $615,000. So a $200,000 increase over 6 years. So those two numbers alone, sorry, can you jump back to that? Those two numbers alone would indicate that a $500,000 lift is appropriate for the Ephrata School District. This is just, I just want to kind of let you know that we've fallen behind with our levy a bit. Because again, remember the levy is 10% of our operating budget. That's what we budget, is about 10% will be levy and LEA, what we get from the state. So in 2020, I only did 4 years on this. In 2020, the expense of running the Ephrata School District was about $36 million. That has increased to $45 million over the last 4 years. Running schools has just become more expensive, MSOC's being a part of it. There's a number of components. Just running schools is very expensive. The first year, so from 2020, 2021 to that very next year, 21, 22, our expenses to run the school increased by over 10%. But our levy only increased by 8%. But it was still supposed to be 10% of our budget. We fell behind. Because ideally, if it's going to stay 10%, if your overall expenditures increase 10%, then you want your levy to increase 10%. That would keep you right in line with it still being 10% of your budget. Next year, it was a 6% increase, went up 5.4 on our levy. We fell behind a little bit more. We were closer on that one, but we fell behind a little bit more. And then last year, the increase in expenses to run the school district increased by 9%, and our levy only increased by 5.5. And so again, that's just showing that our ask for $500,000 is because there's a need. It's not because we're trying to generate revenue to do more. We're trying to make sure we have revenue to be current to what Ephrata is today. Go ahead. There are some things that let's be real about it. The stronger our schools, the stronger our community. That's not just word of mouth. That's statistically analyzed. Property value increase. I know some people would go, yeah, that's exactly why I'm frustrated, because my property value increased and now I'm paying more. Again, the dollar amount we pay does not go up. Dollar amount stays the same. And so ideally, if rate or if value increases countywide, then all of us are still paying the same amount, we're just paying it at a lower rate. What's hard is when Macy has a $100,000 increase on her home, but Page's sits flat. Because now Macy has to pay more, but Page doesn't. Does that kind of make sense? And so that's just kind of important. But at the end of the day, property values are good. There's value in property investment long term. So I think that's just important to know. Employment rates in your communities go up when your schools are strong. We have people who move to Ephrata because they want their kids to be in the Ephrata School District. That means they're working in the businesses in Ephrata at times. I do understand that we can be a little bit of a satellite community for maybe some other areas around us, but your community employment rates do go up the stronger your schools are. Again, statistically analyzed. And then your neighborhoods are safer. The stronger your kids are, your schools are, the more educated your kids are, the more engaged your kids are. There's just a long-term benefit for neighborhood safety. Again, I really want to be transparent. This is a two-phase approach. We do fully prepare after this levy this year. We have a second phase of wanting to come back with a bond. I did not want to hide this. I felt that was absolutely inappropriate for our community. I wanted to be incredibly transparent to our community and be really, really upfront that we have every intention to move beyond phase 1 to phase 2, to move from the levy to the bond, and to try to take on the facilities throughout the rest of our district. We do understand that's a lift for all of us. We do fully recognize that. But I want to be really clear. As most people kind of understand about phases, you don't get to phase 2 without phase 1. And so levy will be a vital component to being able to access phase 2. And I just want to be really transparent about that, okay? Again, just coming back to this, the tax collection that is going to be on the ballot that you're going to see, it's already in the voters pamphlet that's arrived in your mailboxes, your parents' mailboxes. That tax collection will not change. The rate that was on there that said $1.85 each year is based on our best guesses. And again, based on the phone call from our treasurer just prior to this meeting, there's even an indication that year one is going to be much lower than what we projected. Okay, because it looks like 2025 is going to be lower than we projected. So that amount will not change. This amount will, because it's, again, based on your assessed value, or excuse me, your enrollment. The other thing that impacts it is just some inflationary numbers. And so you can make some good estimates based on what you think is going to happen. Again, we did that conservatively. This can change, but you can only access this, which ends up being over $13 million based on our estimates, if the voters approve that. I want to remind you again, tigersvote.org is a wonderful resource for you. And I encourage you to go to that. I encourage you to send others to that. I encourage you to have your parents go take a look at it. Again, in this capacity right now, why am I here? I'm the superintendent of Ephrata Schools. I'm here to inform. I'm not here to promote. But the one thing I can encourage you to do is this. Be informed and vote. Be informed and vote. And vote what you believe. If you believe it's appropriate to support the levy, support the levy. If you believe it's appropriate to not support the levy, don't support the levy. But be informed and vote. It's important for all of us to do that. This is now the time that I'd like to make sure I'm available for questions. Aaron's here to kind of help if we need to pass the mics around. I want to let you know we are a couple of thank yous. First of all, I want to thank Sarah Morford. She's our communications specialist, director of communications. Sarah, can you do this? I'm not really sure how she does it, so here's Sarah. She's amazing. Reached out to Scott Sandberg literally today and said, you know what I think we need to do for our community, because I think there's going to be a number of community members that are unable to attend today. Let's make sure Tiger Vision is running a broadcast that we can then post online for people to watch. So I want to thank Scott and his son who's here. I think they're making some others in the space, so thank you. I really appreciate the enthusiasm, by the way. This next one, let's like really give it to him. And then also in the back of the room, we have Aaron Loppelbein that's making sure this mic is working well so you can hear us. So let's give Aaron. So a couple of thank yous there. And then again, I'm here for you. I'm here to answer your questions. I'm here to hopefully help you be educated as you go to, and cast your ballot and determine whether or not you want to support the levy. And so that's my job in this moment. Okay, questions? Hand raised.
I have some.
Thank you. Jolene and I went to school too.
I'm not planted, I promise. No, I just have a concern that most of the people in this room I see already at activities, we have kids that are involved, and we know how important the levies are. This was all very good information, but how is it getting out to the people on social media or wherever that are not understanding what it's all about, how it works, new tax and all this stuff. I've seen the same things that you see.
Sure.
So I looked on one of the city social media sites. There was nothing about this meeting there. So how are we going to get to the people that need this information?
Sure. Yeah, Jolene, first of all, I appreciate the question. I think it's a valid question, and it's a valid concern that we have as well. We're living in a little bit of a unique time in Ephrata. 4 years ago when we ran our levy, we had the Grant County Journal. Yeah. And the Grant County Journal was widely distributed throughout our community. It was a great resource for young and old. It doesn't exist anymore. And so we're trying to fill that void and communicate via the channels that we currently have. And they're not ideal for everyone. And so we're working to grow and do better. Yes, we are, again, tigersvote.org. I think a little bit of a communication army will help. I think students going to your families and then having your family share that with their friends. I think adults that are in the room doing the same thing. Again, my job in this moment is to inform so that people can go to can cast their ballot with information. I'm a believer personally that, you know, lack of knowledge is one of our biggest enemies. And I think people hesitate to be real about life. That's not me. I'm an open book. I'll share the good, the bad, the ugly. You know, I've got one of my former teachers lost her. But we're getting black and white ones. But Jolene, one thing I will tell you, one thing that is going to land in every property owner in Ephrata's mailbox right about the same time they receive their ballots is we have a large mailer that's going out. So one of the things that we can do legally, we can provide this information when we're presenting. We can utilize our normal communication tools, social media, Line, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can legally do that. But one other thing, whenever you're running a levy or a bond, is you can do a one-time mailing to your property owners. And so what we are doing is there's a mailer that's coming out print very, very soon and will be, you know, postage marked and sent to homeowners. That's actually bigger and broader than this and provides more of what's in the presentation, but also brings everybody back to tigersvote.org. And so that's some of what we're doing, Jolene, to try to get that out there. Again, I don't think we've landed on this is the best way in the current reality of Ephrata. But I'm open to ideas. You know, if you guys have ideas, I mean, share those.
Are you having more of these meetings?
Yeah, so there's one more.
Do you have a list? I think you're at the bookery as well.
Yeah, so we have one more planned. Just so you know, too, I am getting into some of our civic groups. I presented at Rotary. I'm going to be presenting at a city council meeting. I'm going to be with the Lions Club. I presented to all of our staff. Actually, tomorrow will be my last staff group presentation. Parkway staff. Saw some Parkway staff there. What's up?
ETO.
Thank you. Our principals are presenting to our parent organizations. And then, like you just mentioned, I'm going to be at the bookery next week. Is it Thursday, Sarah? Wednesday. Next Wednesday, the 22nd. That's called Coffee Cocoa with Ken. Why is it called Coffee Cocoa with Ken? Because I wanted to be able to indulge to it. I don't drink coffee, so it's Coffee Cocoa with Ken. And so that's an opportunity. That's going to be broader than just the levy, though, Jolene. I really want that one to just be, what's the questions you have about the district? I'm hoping people will come with levy questions. But that's going to be there.
Do you have a place, sorry that I'm undertaking this. Do you have a place that lists all of those dates, all the different places that people can go, the line, you know, wherever, all the civic groups? Do you have that where people can say, oh, I'm part of this group, I can go on this day?
So we haven't, Jolene, we haven't been communicating that out to Lions membership. We're asking the Lions to do that. So for example, I just spoke to the Lions president today, who's talking about, yeah, I've got confirmation of attendance. It's actually going to be at Timeout Pizza next week. I'm going to enjoy that as well. Found out I'm getting pizza prior to the presentation. And that'll be a nice place to be. Really what we're really trying to focus in on, Jolene, is the things that we are running kind of at a district level. And so we do on our website have tonight's, we've put it on social media. We did a remind out to our families. We did communicate, the chamber, I think, had it on their information, was a spot, and then the bookery's done some communications as well for, you know, Coffee, Cocoa, and Ken. I will say this too, not everybody can be in those spaces, but if we can get them to tigersvote.org, there's actually a way that people can write on tigersvote.org, submit questions that they might have, and ask those questions. You know, again, we saw a number of things on social media. And I'll be honest with you, as much as I want to be able to chase everything on social media, and I don't mean chase in a bad way, there's just no way to be able to be responsive to everything you have on social media. Beyond that, my wife, who's in the back of the room, wants me to be a husband occasionally. Which, by the way, you guys give her a round of applause, because trust me, I've not been that great of a husband as I've been with my wife. She's been phenomenal. Thank you. I appreciate that. Hopefully that will be a good win for husband. So thank you for the laugh. I appreciate it. But that tigersvote.org really is a great way when people have questions to ask them. Open book. I have a parent that reached out to our board directors with some pretty hard questions. Our board directors got me that question. I was responsive to it. Again, I'm going to be responsive to the questions that come. That's a belief that we have in Ephrata. You ask questions, we're gonna do our best to find you answers. And so please reach out, ask those questions, use tigersvote.org. Info@Ephrata Schools is another .org. It's .org, right? That's the email address that people can also, if they're like, I can't remember what the superintendent's name, I can't remember what the high school principal's name is, or assistant superintendent, if they can remember info@EphrataSchools.org, that's an email that comes to kind of our leadership group that then we can be responsive to. And so, Joe, we're doing the best we can, trying to make it better.
I'm not trying to be negative, I've seen a lot of the negativity and I'm concerned, and so I want this information to reach as many people as possible, so I believe you guys are doing great.
Well, Jolene, and I'm not taking it as being critical. I think it's good thinking, and that's why we're here. You know, I want that thinking in the space, and you know, I do think as we move forward into the future, what are other ways that we can communicate and ensure that our voters have the knowledge that they need to be informed. Any other questions?
I got one.
Yes.
So, I'll just say, I'm John Schwab, I'm the troll of the debate. In the sewer, as John. I read it, okay? Pretty offensive.
Sure.
I didn't go out and call them in, okay? So, this is a levy, I understand, it's for the kids and for the community. Seems like the state dangles a carrot to raise our taxes here, to raise our taxes over here. The PUD raises my taxes, they're going up 3%. I don't make $100,000. I'll be honest, I make $63,000. They tax, on that, I make about $4. Not making a lot of money. So, you raise this, you raise that, you raise that. I can't afford it. We had an opportunity back in November to vote Jay Inslee's carbon tax out. Okay? That's 50 cents a gallon we pay it right now. So we'll have another 50 cents. That's a dollar. Could have voted that out, maybe more money.
Yeah.
I'm getting tax step, and what you gonna do in 4 years? So come back to me and ask again. You're asking again next year for a call.
Yeah. No, and John,
And it just keeps going up. Where does it end?
yeah, John, I hear you.
I can't do it.
No, John,
No, I can't.
John, I appreciate you being here tonight. I appreciate you being here because your voice is important. Your voice is important for people to
I'm
understand.
probably the only one here.
Well, but John, but hear me out. We need to hear that. And I just want you to know, when you look back at that, what is the amount of revenue that is generated by local tax in Ephrata in comparison to other communities in Grant County and in comparison to the state average? It's because we do our best to be as conservative as we possibly can be, and we try to ask our local voters to pay the least amount possible so that we can continue to operate. But I hear you.
You're asking for a tax.
I get it.
You're trying to sell a tax.
No, I'm not trying to sell anything right now. Here's what I'm doing. John, I'm trying to make sure you're informed. And at the end of the day, if the answer for John is I can't afford and I can't support the levy, then I'm gonna look John in the eye and say, I get it and I understand. And I respect you and your decision, and we'll move on. Just like I'll say the same thing if somebody says, I'm gonna find a way to support it because I can. I'll look them in the eye and say, I get it, I respect it, and I'm gonna move on. I'm not gonna look at John, now that I know who John is, and I'm glad I do, and I'm gonna tell you, John, if I pass you on the street, I'm gonna shake your hand. Because you were willing to come here tonight. And you were willing to at least have more understanding and more knowledge. And you were willing to state your opinion. That matters to me. And so I respect you tremendously. I respect where you're at. It's hard for me too. Tax is hard. And I don't disagree with what you said kind of before in terms of what we can do. I think this is an important thing for students. If you don't mind, John, I'm going to shift to the students here. This is what is important for you guys to hear and understand and know. That being an informed electorate and being able to go out and vote for things beyond just the immediate impact and think about what is the value in what we're being asked? What is the cost, which sometimes is tax? What is the cost, sometimes is a policy? Really to go beyond just, well, I feel good about it, yeah, or I feel bad about it, no. Every decision that we make as an electorate in our state and in our country has an impact beyond that moment in that space. And that's what John's talking about right here. And so, as you get the opportunity, and I know it's years from now for you guys, as you get the opportunity, Be an informed voter. And vote in a way that allows you to be responsive to not only that moment, but to think about long-term impacts, not only on yourself, but on others, because it all matters. So John, thank you. I do appreciate what you said. Do you have a question at all? Okay, okay, excellent. Yes, Lisa.
I think it's important to think around communities around us. What happens when we vote a levy down? Like, what happens to the place when we vote a levy?
Yeah.
Now, be responsible with our funds. We have to take care of our community. And we have to live in our own homes to make decisions for ourselves. I'm not saying anything about what he did. Like, I respect him for his opinion.
Sure.
But when we talk about levies and bonds, what happens when you vote no? So
Yeah.
with levy, what happens when you vote no? Lots of times, right? Look what happened in Moses Lake. I work with lots of nurses in Moses Lake who suddenly their levy didn't pass, and they have classroom sizes over 30. They have no activity. They have weird start times, weird end times. They have busing problems. They have all these things. So I think a lot of people in our community, they want to vote no because of all of the taxes. So what does that make our school look like? And I think our school is really trying to be positive about our levy. This is what we're planning to do. But if we don't pass this levy, what will our district look like?
Yeah.
And that's the hard pill to swallow. Like, what would it look like?
So John and Lisa, I don't want us to be in kind of an audience interaction. I want to be the one facilitating kind of the conversation. I think that's the most appropriate for a town hall. Because I certainly don't want opinions to be pitted against each other. I just don't think that's appropriate for this setting. So let me just be responsive to your question. As I indicated, 10% of our operating budget is levy or LEA funded. And so if you looked at the current operations of the Ephrata School District, we would have to look very, very creatively at where we can find a 10% savings. And that's just the plain and simple truth. And I indicated those types of things that are funded through levy dollars. And so those are the types of things that are going to be the first things that you look at in terms of trying to create some of those savings. And so that's just the reality to it. I don't want to speak to the Moses Lake experience. That's an experience that their community is navigating through, and their district has done an admirable job running their district with funding that is not necessarily in line with the funding they had before. And I fully recognize that it was bigger and broader than just levy. Okay, that was just a piece, that was a component of that. But that's just the brass tacks answer to your question. Is it's 10% of what we do annually, and we'd have to look at that 10% really, really hard to really determine where you make those savings. Because one of the things I'm not going to do as a superintendent in Ephrata is I'm not going to put us into a situation where we're bankrupt. Our community deserves schools that operate and function effectively, because there's a huge investment in our schools. Like I said, roughly $50 million this year. That's a huge investment, whether it's local dollars, state dollars, or whatever. That's an investment in our kids. That's a responsibility that I have, and we will be incredibly intelligent if we're in a situation where our funding is not aligned with what our current operations are. Any other questions? Students, any questions? Other than, can we leave now? Well, I'm not going to keep anybody any longer than there are questions. I really sincerely appreciate you for coming. I appreciate the questions I did hear. I will ask you this. I'm going to ask you some questions. Where do you go if you want to revisit some of this information? Actually, Sarah, why don't we jump into it real quick? So, tigersvote.org. I just want to show you some things that are living in tigersvote.org. You scroll down, and by the way, this video will be posted in here. A link to this video from the night will be posted in here. Let me start with the initial press release when our board ran the resolution to support putting a levy on the ballot. That press release is there and available. This presentation, you can go back and revisit this presentation if you want to look at it. It's there. Make plans to attend a public meeting. That's where Jolene, in our information, where we're demonstrating, here's where you can go. Frequently asked questions. Here is a really, really good spot for you to send people to. So why did that go to small works roster? Okay, so frequently asked questions. So this we've been growing as we've been receiving questions. Honestly, on New Year's Day, when there was conversation around our levy, I think, Sarah, if I remember right, that ended up, you and I created 4 FAQs based on what we were hearing in the questions from our community. So, for example, what's a good one? I'm trying to think of one. Can you just think of one that maybe came up in that moment, Sarah? I can't either. It's been so long. Oh, yeah, one that came up was, hey, enrollment's going down. Because what are we hearing? Nationwide, the trend is for a decrease in enrollment. Even in our state, there's a trend for a decrease in enrollment. Not in Ephrata. We have seen an increase in enrollment. And then I just want to show you too, this is also a great little graph that shows how we traditionally conservatively estimate. So the number one driver to our budget is student enrollment. That's the number one component that drives our budget. Can you go back to that, Sarah? And scroll up. So I just want to show you, black is what we budgeted, orange is what we actually, and if you look at that, there are very few years historically that we budgeted an enrollment that was higher than our actual enrollment. Here's an example. Even as you move into this year, we budgeted flat enrollment this year of 2545, and we're actually sitting around, if I remember right, the last time, about 2610 on average this year. And so that's a real good win for our district. That means we're getting more revenue than we budgeted for. Really smart strategy. But this is an example of the types of things that are available on our FAQ site. I also want to let you know, again, Jolene, I shared with you, if somebody has a question, there's actually a spot right here in our tigersvote.org. If you got a question, give it to us. The good, the bad, the ugly. Give it to us. Give us an opportunity to answer your question. The only thing that I hope people will do is not share misinformation. That's the hard spot, is when information is being shared that's inaccurate, it puts all of us at risk, whether it's in support of a levy or against a levy. Accurate information is key, and so I'd much rather people ask the question and get the correct information rather than just sharing based on what they think they like. So
how do you get back to them?
So if you look down here, they actually give us their name, they give us their email address. Like I said, I had a direct email correspondence with somebody who reached out directly to our board, and actually then followed that up with a phone conversation just recently. And that one came through a different venue, that came through our board. I know Sarah's interacted with a number of people directly. Schedule a meeting with me. I'll make time. I want people to be informed. Again, guys, thank you so much for your time tonight. Appreciate you being here. Go Tigers!
Good show. The longest.